Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Chin-Quee Chats, the bite-sized podcast where we talk movies, sports, and everything in between. I am your host, Matthew Chin-Quee, and boy has it been a very long time since I've done this. So long, in fact, that it feels kind of weird to just be talking to a mic all by myself with a fridge unplugged because it makes too much noise and staring at my voice as it records on the recording service. But it's been a while. It's been, by the time this is up, it's been almost a month since my last podcast, or since my last episode, which I believe was with Caleb Danger Spate about Star Wars. And after that, school got hard. I didn't really have time to do much of anything, just because fourth year marketing student, life gets pretty busy around that time. So I had a bunch of projects and reports due, so I didn't really have much time to dedicate to recording again. And then also there was I don't want to say falling out, but I am no longer with Geek Pulse Radio, the iTunes. So if you're listening to this, whether it be on YouTube or the Libsyn or Google Play or the newly minted Spotify feed, I am working to get iTunes back up. Hopefully by the release date tomorrow, iTunes will be up. But that is also no promises. So there is actually a chance that you might be listening to this on iTunes, but there isn't. There also is an equal chance that you might not be. Anyways, there was that going down. So I wasn't really sure what to do with the podcast yet. I knew I wanted to keep going, but that whole mixture of things just led to me taking a break. However, what I didn't take a break from was watching movies, and actually, no, that also is not true because for around 2-3 weeks there, I just barely watched any movies just because I was doing so much work. But last week, I got a chance to catch up on a lot of things, and of course, I didn't miss the big tentpole films, whether that be Thor Ragnarok or Justice League. And I probably won't be mentioning those too much in this episode just because I'm quite sick of people online arguing about comic book movies, and then there is the whole rumored Disney-Fox merger, which is just going to put a hole in things and really piss me off even more. So we're probably not going to talk too much about that, but last week I got to catch up on some movies, and I just came back today from watching a few movies. Some of the better movies this year, some of the Oscar contenders that could be popping up this year. So I'm going to do some quick catch-up reviews on that, maybe 5 minutes each for those, and then in the free chat segment, I'm going to be talking about the second season of This Is Us because it wrapped for its mid-season finale just a few weeks ago, and I kind of wanted to talk about that because I haven't talked about the show, and I really love the show, and I think that more people should be watching, although a lot of people do watch. More people should be paying attention to it because I think it's a brilliant show. But yeah, I'll explain that a little bit later. For now, let's go into the cinema chat. And we are back, and by we, I mean I, and by I, you can tell that I'm kind of rusty. I haven't done this in a while, kind of learning the ropes again. But I am back for the Cinema Chat segment where I keep saying where I am going to catch up on reviews for some of the bigger films that have come out this year. And when I say big, I'm not talking about some of the big blockbusters because, as most of you film fans know, we're out of the blockbuster season, but we are into the Oscar season. Into the films that a lot of cinephiles consider to be the big films, the real heavy hitters, the ones that we are putting on our top 10 list, the ones that we are predicting to win some Oscars or at the very least be nominated for some. Now, just as a preface for this, 2016 was probably one of my favorite years in film in a long time. And granted, I had just become a really, really big film fan in around 2014. I mean, who doesn't like movies before that? But I became a so-called cinephile back then, where I started to pay attention to almost every movie that came out. And that was the first year I had sat down and watched all the all the Oscar movies. So 2016 is one of them where is the year where a lot of films blew me away, and I still consider it to be one of the best film years in a long time, with some of the strongest films and some of my favorite films to come out in the last decade or so. And 2017, it hadn't really lived up to that. And granted, that is a really high that is a really high standard to meet in my eyes. But we had gone through November. At the beginning of November, I was sitting there. I'm like, I've loved a couple films, namely Big Sick, Dunkirk, Blade Runner 2049, but I haven't loved as many films as I have in 2016. And I was starting to get worried. I was like, if I had to choose right now, I could pick maybe 3 films that I would nominate for Best Picture, and the rest of them I would nominate just because I needed to fill those slots, but I don't really think they're deserving. However, I had yet to see some of the big heavy hitter Oscar contenders, namely Lady Bird, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which from here on I'm going to just refer to as 3 Billboards because that is a mouthful. Florida Project, Disaster Artist, hell, and even Coco, which I caught up on and saw yesterday. And some people are thinking that it could be nominated for Best Picture. But those 5 films are films that I've seen in the last week, and I've really dug in and tried to do some catch up. So after seeing these, I am pleased to say that I think 2017 is catching up real quick to 2016. 2016 hasn't yet been surpassed. 2017 still has a little bit ways to go, but we also have Last Jedi coming out next week, and a couple of heavy hitters that are coming out at the end of the month, like Shape of the Water or Molly's Game, that I've been really excited for. So that really could put me over the top. And unlike 2016, where I had a flurry of films that I just loved, like Captain Fantastic, La La Land, Arrival, 2017 has really crept up for me, and really it slowly built itself up to being one of the better years in recent memory. So with that, I want to start with some catch-up reviews, some real quick. I'm not going to go into in-depth too much with some films, but starting with one of the first films I saw last week, 3 Billboards. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I said I wouldn't say that, but I did. 3 Billboards is a film that was directed by Martin McDowell, something. He directed In Bruges and 7 Psychopaths in the past, which are very, very cinephile movies. Many people, general audiences probably wouldn't have heard of them, but they're very meta, and they're very dark black humor. Almost like an edgier Edgar Wright in sort of way, because he does have that British style humor. His films were set, at least In Bruges was set in the UK. So he has a very unique style of humor that doesn't always necessarily translate to Americans, which is weird because 3 Billboards is set in America, and I believe it is his only film that's set in America. I can't remember about 7 Psychopaths. I did see it last year, but I can't remember exactly where it took place. But anyways, this film is about a grieving mother who has just lost her child, her teenage daughter, who was raped and murdered about 7 months ago, and the police department hasn't done anything. So she puts up 3 billboards, kind of calling them out, and then I wouldn't say it's hijinks because I wouldn't say hijinks ensue because that would imply that this film is very light in tone, because it is most certainly not. Is a very, very dark film, but it also is very, very funny. It really takes the characters within the film, whether that be Frances McDormand's character or Sam Rockwell's or Woody Harrelson's, and these are the big 3 standout characters in the film, and writes them in a certain way that makes them both compelling and and you can feel empathetic for them while also not necessarily liking them. And the actors themselves give some of the best performances I've seen this year. Frances McDormand and Sam Rockwell, I believe, should be locks for best actress and best supporting actor respectively, because of their performances in this. And Sam Rockwell specifically stands out as someone who is incredible in this film, because he starts off as one of the most unlikable characters I've seen this year, and to have him by the end of the film be someone that you don't necessarily like, but you are very empathetic for. You understand where he's coming from, and you're starting to try to root for him. And I will give a lot of credit to the writing and the director, but Sam Rockwell also has to sell that very well. He has to sell how shitty this character is at the beginning, how petty he is, how stupid he is, and to kind of take that journey with us and transform him into someone who we're rooting for, who we feel very, very bad for at the end, because he is, at the end of the day, just a misunderstood guy. I think that's incredible, and a testament to Sam Rockwell's acting ability, who just also happens to be a very underrated actor, whether it be in Moon or I believe he was actually in Seven Psychopaths as well. But he is in a lot of these smaller films and smaller roles, but he stands out. And for people who in the industry know his name, they know him to be one of the better actors working out there right now. Speaking of better actors or actresses, the next film that I saw was Lady Bird, and this film is directed by Greta Gerwig, directed and written by Greta Gerwig, and stars Saoirse Ronan, who is probably one of the best up and coming young actors today. And I wouldn't even say she's up and coming; she's been here for a long time. But she was just nominated 2 years ago for Brooklyn, and I would bet everything I own that she'd be nominated for Best Actress this year, and she's going to give Frances McDormand a run for her money. Now, Lady Bird isn't a film that I connected to as much as Three Billboards, which I, by the way, gave a 5 out of 5 to. I absolutely loved it. Mostly because, and then talking about Lady Bird now, mostly because I didn't really connect much to the character until the very end, and her story really felt kind of disjointed. I get what Greta Gerwig was going for, but there are a bunch of storylines within the film that are introduced, and then it's not that they're not resolved, they're just very hastily resolved, and it feels like they were just in there as fluff. And it's not like this film is super long either. This film is, it's a pretty short movie, but it feels like a lot of those storylines are super fluffed, and the film itself just feels unfocused, which I find really unfortunate, because Saoirse Ronan is so good in the titular character of Lady Bird, of Christine something, I forget her name, who goes by Lady Bird. And for those of you who don't know, this film is kind of following her through her senior year, and then ends with her in college, just kind of following her life as someone who is from a very poor family, but someone who also wants to express themselves and try to fit in and kind of go through high school. But there are films out there, and one recently that I felt kind of stood out compared to this, and that's Edge of 17. I think it did it a lot better than Lady Bird did. However, I'm probably in the minority with this, as Lady Bird is, if you didn't know, it just cracked the record for the best Rotten Tomato score of all time. Has 100% with, I don't know, like 150 plus reviews, which passes Toy Story 2 as the most certified or best reviewed film on that site in its site's history. So obviously a lot of people are loving it, and it's coming on a lot of people's top 10 lists as being a universally loved film. I apologize for my rustiness. Again, it's been a very long time, but I didn't necessarily hate this film. I don't think anybody can sit there and say and point at this film and say that it's a bad film, because I did enjoy it, and there were parts that really got me invested, and there were parts that I really loved. But there are other parts where I sat there scratching my head. I'm like, I don't know why this is in the movie. I don't know where this is going. I understand how it's connected to the plot, but I think that you could have gone somewhere else with this. Spent more time with Lady Bird, spent more time exploring more about herself rather than how she affects other people and the people surrounding her. That, or expand on the storylines that were already introduced and give them more room to breathe rather than resolving them 10 minutes after they're brought up and then never bring them up again. So that's my review on Lady Bird. Next movie, The Florida Project. Now, this is one that I had almost zero clue about what this film was about, because I had seen the trailer, and that trailer does not give you much. It gives you children, and it gives you Willem Dafoe being a dad, kind of, which is kind of weird, because everybody sees Willem Dafoe as, for better or for worse, they see him as the Green Goblin, or someone who's kind of evil looking, kind of weird looking, so you don't really trust him. But this role is another one where I can see him going up against Sam Rockwell for a Best Supporting Actor. Now, The Florida Project is about, if any of you have ever gone to Disney World and driven right by Kissimmee, the town of Kissimmee, which, contrary to popular belief, Walt Disney World is not in Orlando. It's actually in Kissimmee, Florida. But if you drive through this town, right outside of Disney World, there are all these really cheap motels, these cheap gift shops that are really, really tacky and very, very tourist trappy. And this is about a impoverished family who's living in that motel. And it's about the 9-year-old girl, I want to say, maybe 8-year-old girl, and her adventures, because this is all she's ever known in life. And the whole world is just an adventure for her. And it's about her in the summer with her friends, kind of exploring and kind of getting up to no good, just like how regular kids do. They would run down to the local, an ice cream shop, and then beg tourists for money, and then try to swindle them out of that. And then her mom she is not really the most responsible mother. It's implied that she got pregnant way too early, doesn't really know what to do, because they're living in a hotel, and she's barely scraping rent. The way she makes money is kind of ripping off tourists. And then Willem Dafoe is the manager of this hotel. And mind you, when I say hotel, it's not like an Embassy Suites or a Hilton. This is like, if you want to go search it up, I believe it's called the Magic Castle Inn or something like that. It's really cheap, really not so sketchy, really tacky hotel, right outside of Walt Disney World. Obviously trying to capture on, the magic. And they actually address that in the film, where there's a Brazilian tourist who thinks that this is Magic Kingdom Castle, and turns out it's not, and they're out in for a surprise. But this is a film that I have seen a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but it's a very vocal minority being against this film, just because it's really about nothing. There's certainly conflict in the movie, but there really isn't a narrative through line. There isn't a story that really drives the film. This is really from the kid's perspective. Just kind of about how she's exploring life through the summer, through exploring her friends in another room, or another hotel, and then just kind of going about their own business, and everything that goes on from there is through the child's eyes. And probably the most prime example of this is, minor spoilers, her mom begins to work as a prostitute. So, but of course, a child wouldn't understand that, and her mom puts her in the bathroom, makes her take a bath while she has a client over, blasting music. So the first scene, it kind of switches to that, and you're kind of sitting there. It's like, why are we just watching her take a bath and listen to music? And then the second scene goes on, And I remember thinking, I'm like, do I hear moaning in the background, or is that just me? And the third time, the guy actually comes into the bathroom, not knowing that the child character Mooney is taking a bath, and that's when it clicks. And then you're like, okay, now I understand. As an adult, you understand. As a kid, and I certainly do not recommend you watch this movie as a kid. It's just the perspective of the child. As a child, the child wouldn't understand, but as an adult, you understand what's going on and how much Mooney's mother Haley is struggling through this. So it's a really, really cool film, a very, very much character-driven film. And if you wanna hear about the merits of character versus narrative-driven films, I'd suggest you go back 2 episodes, I believe, when I had Dean Byrne, my good friend Dean Byrne, on the podcast, where we talked about why we love character-driven films just as much or even more as narrative films. We love them. So the Florida Project is probably the prime example this year of a character-driven film. Now, running out of time in the Cinema Chat segment, so we're going to quickly go through Coco. I don't know how Pixar keeps doing it. If you put their sequels aside, that being Finding Dory and Cars 3, which actually both weren't bad. Cars 3 was a lot better than I was expecting. It's a great story about, growing up and learning to not necessarily give up, but learning to realize that sometimes it's enough and you can't do it anymore, and you have to step aside to let the young guns go. But yeah, Cars 3 was a lot better than I was expecting. But Coco, I don't understand how Pixar keeps doing it with their films, with their original ones. I mean, I remember going into this film and I was like, oh, I'm not going to cry as much as I did in Inside Out. And by the end of it, I was with my friend Alexandra, and we didn't want to look at each other. We're like, don't look at me, don't talk to me. I'm trying not to cry here because this film is so emotionally powerful. And one thing I will say, I am not a Mexican myself, but watching this film, seeing the Mexican culture portrayed in such a way was so powerful, and it gave me almost a sense of pride. I can't even imagine what this film would be like to watch as a Mexican, as someone who is personally connected to this culture, can relate to this on a personal level. So I applaud Pixar and Disney. And if you go back 2 months ago, you'll see an episode where I just talk about my love for that company. John Lasseter scandal aside, I really love that company, and they created such a beautiful story with such beautiful music in it. And then finally today I saw Disaster Artist, which I will say I'm along the lines of Lady Bird, maybe a little bit more positive than Lady Bird, but I will say that James Franco probably also is a lock for Best Actor, which is very, very ironic because it's a film that is about probably the worst movie ever made, not counting Star Wars Holiday Special. And it's going to be up for some Oscars because James Franco puts on a hell of a performance and completely embodies this wacky character, this weird guy known as Tommy Wiseau. From his mannerisms to his laugh to his accent, it's it's almost creepy. There is a moment in the post credits. This isn't really story related, so I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it. In the post credits, where Tommy Wiseau actually makes an appearance, and they're talking to each other. It's like a mirror, man. It's very, very strange, and a testament to James Franco's talent. So that movie's really cool. Not my biggest problem in the film, and I haven't really had much time to sit on it. As I said, I literally just came back from the theater and started recording. My biggest problem with it is I feel like up until the end, the film was making fun of him, while also portraying him as he's a weird dude. Everybody knows he's a weird dude, but he's a passionate dude and guy who just wants to follow his dreams. And I felt bad seeing and laughing and making kind of quote unquote making fun of making fun of Tommy Wiseau throughout the film. I just kind of felt bad for him up until the very end, where the film explicitly said we're not making fun of you. It was almost meta in a way, saying they're not laughing at you. I know this isn't the response you wanted from your movie, but this is still a positive response. People still love it, even if it's not for the reasons that you wanted. And it was a nice touching moment, and that was where I really started to get drawn into the film. So the film itself, it's good. I didn't love it as much as I wanted to, but from its recreation to the room, and I do want to see James Franco's version, because apparently he did shoot enough to just make a shot-by-shot remake, which I think is hilarious. From that, and the comedy in there is pretty good, and then James Franco's performance, of course, it's spectacular. But anyways, I'm out of time in the Cinema Chat segment. I sorry if that was a little rusty, but that time just flew by. I'm actually really surprised how fast that went. But those are reviews of 5 films that I think that could be in the best picture conversation. A couple of weeks, I will be having a top 10 list being put together, probably right after I see Star Wars: The Last Jedi. So look out for that, and I'm willing to bet a couple of these films are going to be on there. But for now, we'll take a break, and then I'll be right back to talk about this. This Is Us. And now it's time for the free chat segment, where I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite TV shows out there, This Is Us, or one of my favorite TV shows that's now currently running. Now, I haven't actually talked about this show, not even the first season. And so just again, like I normally do, I'm going to preface this by explaining where I had been first introduced. Now, last year around August, I started to see these commercials for this TV show, and I was like, that looks stupid and cheesy. It's another one of those dramas. It's like Grey's Anatomy without the surgery part. So I didn't watch it, and I heard a lot of people talking about how great this show is, and I was like, no, it's not for me. I'm not going to try it out. And then came around April of 2017, so just this past April, I was looking for something to do so I didn't have to study, and lo and behold, I watched the entire season of This Is Us in like 2 days, and I don't even know how I ended up giving it a try. I just started watching. In the first episode, I was freaking hooked. There's a twist in the first episode, which most of you probably know now, but if you don't, I'm not going to spoil it for you, because it kind of dictates how the whole rest of the show is going to go. But I was hooked from the first episode, and I just ended up sitting there for like hours watching this TV show about it's just about family. There are various storylines in there, but coming back to my point about the Florida Project, it is really the reason you really watch the show is for the characters and the character dynamics between them, and how well constructed these characters are. They're not, I mean, part of them are kind of Hollywood-esque, but at the end of the day, the reason why people keep coming back to this show is because you can relate to these characters, because they feel real. You look at Jack, the dad character, and you see certain parts of your own dad. You see you see moments where he's making some stupid cheesy joke, and his teenage kids are just looking at him. It's like, what are you even saying right now? That's stupid. And he's just laughing his ass off. Or a mom arguing with their kid, but and deep down you still know that they love each other, or even the two parents fighting, or the kids growing up, or the kids dynamic with each other. The entire show, it's known as the crying show. I mean, when you go on Twitter, you do hashtag This Is Us, a Kleenex box pops up. But I'd argue that the show's main draw for me is how relatable the storylines and the characters are, and how, for lack of a better phrase, comfortable it feels to kind of just be watching your own family. They're borderline dysfunctional, because they go through so many problems together, whether that's just a personal problem by themselves, a singular problem, or a problem as a family together. But at the end of the day, they're a family, and it is really comforting just to watch them. It's really cool. So that is my preface on This Is Us, and season 1, it's on Canadian Netflix, so I suggest going and watching it. It's like 18 episodes or something like that. It really draws you in very quick, and I don't know anybody who's actually tried to watch this and didn't like the show, so I suggest watching that. But season 2, spoilers for season 2 because I'm going to review everything. It was hard for season 2 to live up to season 1, because season 1 is probably one of the biggest shows of last year, of this past television season. I'm still kind of new to television other than HBO stuff, so I'm not really sure how the seasons work, really. Generally, they start in September and, go to April, May. But this show blew up. It had people talking about it everywhere. It was nominated for Emmys, so it had a lot to live up to this second season. A lot of people actually have felt a little bit down on this season. And while I will certainly say that it's not as good as the first season was, because in that first half of the first season, you had some huge bombshells. I mean, you had the initial first twist, and then you had the Thanksgiving episode, and then it ends in that cliffhanger of a Christmas episode that gave me a heart attack. Hint, hint, for those who have actually watched the first season, that was actually my feeble attempt at a joke. But season 2 has had a lot to live up to. And they introduced this season a few different storylines with Kate and Toby, who are probably my least favorite part of the show, just because I think Toby is annoying, and I'm not really on board with Kate either. And then it introduces a drug abuse storyline with Kevin, which is absolutely heartbreaking. And then Randall has his storyline with his foster daughter. And all these kind of culminated in these last 3 episodes of the season, of the mid-season, which were entitled Number 1, Number 2, Number 3, all focusing on the same moment in both the flashback and the modern time, the same moments, couple few days, but from each of the big three's perspectives. And I think these are some of the best episodes the show has put out ever, especially number 1. Now, I've been following Justin Hartley, who plays Kevin, since he was in Smallville, and that was like in 2006, and he wasn't by no means bad there, but it's also a CW show, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. Their acting is, to say subpar is probably generous, and to say cheesy is very generous. So I wasn't exactly impressed with. I wouldn't say it wasn't exactly impressed. He was serviceable in season 1, but this episode in season 2, I believe it was episode 8, entitled Number 1. That he probably locked himself for an Emmy nomination there from his monologue within the episode, which is something that you don't see in TV very much nowadays, or at least in primetime cable television, not some of the premium channels like with Westworld or something like that. But you don't see that much in this common television. I don't really know what it's called. Again, kind of new to TV. From that monologue to the heartbreaking end where he's just sobbing on the ground. He is drunk, he is high, he's lost everything. He lost his wife. He lost, I don't know if he's lost that role in that movie with Ron Howard, but he lost his dad's necklace, and that entire scene is heartbreaking. It's completely driven by Justin Hartley, so hats off to him. It's a great episode. And then they add another nail in the coffin with Kate losing the baby, and then nobody knows about Kevin. And now there's Randall's daughter Tess, who was in the car when Kevin got arrested for DUI, and everything is just coming back to and leading up to Kevin's in the second season, where he is going to be going through a real shit time. And it's very reminiscent, and they definitely did this on purpose, of his father's own struggles with addiction, of Jack's own struggle with alcoholism. But long story short, season 2, I don't think it's as strong as season 1 so far, but it's definitely not bad by any means, as it has some of the best episodes, and probably the best episode, in my opinion, of the entire show, and that's number 1, the episode that the aptly named number 1 that I just spent like 2 minutes talking about. But anyways, kind of out of time here, so just to sum things up, watch This Is Us because of its ability to make you relate to the characters, and because of its ability to make you feel some real strong emotions. Try not to cry watching this show, I'm telling you, because of the stories and the relatability and the comfiness and the feeling of family. And with that note, gonna end this comeback episode of Chin-Quee Chats. Made it to the end. Thank you for listening, as always. I am now on Spotify, so it's a real easy thing. If you guys have Spotify, I don't even think you have to have Spotify Premium, and everybody has Spotify, so there's no excuse now for you guys not to listen to this. Just search up my name, Chin-Quee Chats. It should pop up there, and then click that follow button so you can listen to my podcasts for free. iTunes should be coming back up soon. Apple's kind of weird. I'll go on a rant about that on another day. Apple's kind of weird with their processes, so it might take a while, but it's still up on everywhere else where it was before. Google Play, YouTube, if you are so inclined. But yeah, if you guys want to keep following me on Twitter, mchinquee96 or CQ_chats, I'll probably be bringing that Twitter back. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. It's really hard to run 2 Twitter accounts, so we'll see. That's also up in the air, kind of getting right back into things. It's difficult. But anyways, for now, just follow at mchinquee96, and until next time, I'll chat with you guys later.
Hello, boys!